Hi, my name is Don Henderson. Welcome again to Been Thinking. Today what I want to do is I just want to go through the chemotherapy aspect of my cancer journey, and inside of 2 weeks of my consult with my oncologist I was into chemotherapy, and the regimen that they had me go through was quite an intensive regimen, and it revolved around having 3 rounds of chemo, and each round was made with 3 cycles, and each cycle ran for about 21 days. Now what would happen with the cycle is that on the first day of the cycle I would go to the oncology ward, the inpatient ward, and they would do an intravenous chemo drip, and that would take probably about around about two hours to do that. And then for the remainder of the cycle I would have a nice big cocktail of drugs every day, and I would just administer those myself at home. And really the thing about my regimen was just how intensive it was. You know, understanding that when you're having chemotherapy you are pumping a poison into your body, and all of those drugs are geared towards just attacking every cell in your body to try and kill off the cancer cells. Unfortunately they also kill everything, and that is why a lot of people will have a really bad time of chemotherapy. And with me, my chemo was running back to back. There were no breaks in between each cycle, and normally there would be, and that was really just to allow your body to recover. Now I was actually quite fortunate in that I didn't have a lot of physical or visible effects with chemotherapy. For most people, the vision that pops into your head if someone talks to you about having gone through chemo, is the baldness or the hair falling out all over their body, going very, very pale and gaunt looking, and you have this kind of almost a corpse look about you. For me, I didn't have any of that. I didn't really have a lot of nausea or diarrhea, which are other common effects associated with cancer. In terms of the hair loss, I had little patches around, just little tiny patches around my head, but that was really about it. And so I actually shaved my head just to cover up those patches. But as you can see, a little bit of thinning for me wasn't going to make a hell of a lot of difference. But I do recall, being able to grab my hair, and if I was to give it just a little bit of a tug, then I would get a clump of hair that would freely come out without any pain whatsoever. And I would play a practical joke on especially my children with that, to which they were kind of not amused, but it was a good laugh for me. So really for me, in terms of the effects that chemotherapy had on me, the major one was it affected my mind and my ability to think. It was like a cloud descended just right across my mind, and I found it difficult to think. Comprehension became difficult at times. Communication became difficult, and I would stumble over words. I found it difficult to communicate ideas, and I found it really difficult to even think at the kind of level that I was always used to thinking at. Understand that for the most part my career has been built around my ability to think, to problem solve, to generate ideas, to come up with strategy, and so the intellectual part of my comprehension was really badly affected, and I found that incredibly frustrating, incredibly stressful, and at times very depressing. And the other effect that I had, a physical effect, was that in my second round of chemotherapy, I developed deep vein thrombosis in my arms from the intravenous side of the chemotherapy, and that hurt like a bitch. Believe me, it really, really hurt. And so I had a few bouts of stays in hospital, so that they could keep an eye on me and make sure that that none of these clots kind of broke loose and got to my brain, which would have been a bit of that would have been a bitch as well, I guess. And then, as well as having the ongoing handfuls of cocktail of chemo drugs that I was taking, I also had to stab myself in the stomach a couple of times a day with a blood thinner. But really, that was the worst aspect of chemotherapy for me. Now, my rounds of chemo, as part of my ongoing treatment, was I would have one round of chemo, then I would have my op to remove part of my esophagus and the top part of my stomach, and then I'd have my last 2 rounds of chemotherapy. And the first round of chemo, not too bad. I'm going to be honest with you, I kind of breezed through that, and I thought, being a typical kind of guy, bloke, I kind of thought, this is chemo, but it was that second round that really started to kick ass, and it was just major fatigue, and it came on quite fast, and it lasted right through that second and third round of chemotherapy. And to be honest with you, once I got into that third round of chemotherapy, I don't think I even felt like death warmed up. I just felt fucking like death. And getting into the later parts of that, the later 8th and 9th cycle, I was just, honestly, I really did not care whether I lived or died. Now, I'm a kind of a private person. I'm a little bit of an introvert. In fact, I'm a lot of an introvert. Even doing these videos for me is really a step out of my comfort zone, and so going through chemotherapy, really with the intensity of it, I was just not able to work. But unfortunately, there are bills that need to be paid, and thankfully, my partner would go off and continue work. But if there were one thing that I would suggest for you, if you're an introvert like myself, and you don't have a massive support team around you, and I don't, and I'm comfortable with that, it would pay for you to get some kind of support team for those later rounds of chemotherapy. Just someone to come and sit with you, to be with you, to visit you, because I did find that final round of chemo was actually very, very lonely for me. And even as an introvert, for me, I'm very, very comfortable with my own company, and anyone who knows me knows that I'm very comfortable in silence. But going through chemotherapy and going through that final round of chemotherapy, with the effect on my mind, I wasn't able to even reach that place of being comfortable, and not having just someone there was really tough. And so in hindsight, what I'd do is I would have someone to come and visit you, even if you arrange it through your local cancer society or something like that, and the Cancer Society is actually a fantastic organisation to make sure that you get support from as you're going through cancer. but yeah, that was a very difficult thing for me to deal with, and so I would suggest that you make sure that you do get that some kind of visitation support on a regular basis as you're going through chemo, and especially if it's intensive. I recall, at one point, my partner came in. I got up, put myself into my lazy boy chair, and believe me, that's a chemo patient's best friend, is that lazy boy. I set myself up in the lazy boy. She came in. She said, "See you, darling, I'm off to work." And then when she came in that evening, I looked at her and I said, "Aren't you going to work?" To which she replied, "I've already been." And that entire day just disappeared and for me. And it was like that day after day after day. The day would just vanish. I wouldn't know where it had gone. I didn't remember. Didn't recall anything. The only way that I remembered that I had actually taken my pills was that we put them into one of those pill organisers. The morning, afternoon, little cabinet things, and that would be the only way that I'd know that I'd actually taken my pills for the day. So really, when it comes to the chemo, understand that there are going to be those ongoing effects. And for me, it was really about that cloud and the over my mind and the fatigue were the major effects for me. Now I finished up my chemotherapy treatment sometime around about June or July of 2011. It took all of that and well into 2012 just for the feeling of fatigue to disappear. I found that I would, during that period, I would get to, I would manage to kind of get to maybe 2 in the afternoon, even after having 5 or 6 hours sleep, which by the way was all I could manage, and that was really due to the surgery that I'd had as well. So a solid 4 or 5 hours sleep was all that I could manage. So I would get to around about 2 in the afternoon, and I'd just smash straight into a brick wall, and I would need to go and have at least another hour and a half, 2 hours of sleep, just to feel okay again. And that's not okay energetic wise, that's just to feel okay. And so it took well over a year just to get to a point where I could make it through the day, and I'd still be buggered, by the way. I'd still be knackered at the end of the day, but I could get through it. But the other effect, and the one that was really ongoing, was this what they call a chemo cloud, and it just hung on my mind, and that took well into the first part of 2013 to begin coming out of that cloud. Now, what was the effect of it? The effect was that I found it really difficult to have a conversation, to string a conversation together. I would stop and start, and of course, when you're in a conversation and you stop, then the person you have a conversation with will fill the void. And as soon as that happened, my thoughts would just disappear, and it wasn't that I wasn't sure of what I was going to say next. It's just that there was almost a disconnect between my thought process and my voice box. And so I would stop, and I'd be trying to make that connection again. And so you can imagine that was really frustrating. And the other frustrating thing was just not being able to think at an intellectual level that I was used to. And as I said, I was really finding solutions and problem solving and strategy is what I'm about. And not to be able to do that, apart from frustrating, was actually a little bit scary, because I wasn't sure whether I'd get it back. and thankfully, I have, and I still find today there are some times when, and you'll probably notice that through these videos, there is still a disconnect. There's still sometimes where the train of thought will just stop. So really, that's what chemotherapy was for me. And one of the things that I would suggest to you is that you really quiz your oncologist, not just about the medical side effects of your chemotherapy, but also any ongoing things. Are there going to be side effects inside of your body? Will this cause deep vein thrombosis for you? Will you get chemo cloud? Or those other kind of side effects, and really have an in-depth conversation, because what they'll do is they'll normally talk to you about the side effects that might directly impact on your health, and things like the nausea and the diarrhea, and those are all the top level kind of very common side effects, and they'll kind of talk about those things, but they won't go to anything else. And if your career and your job takes a lot of thought, and there's a lot of thought process involved, then you really need to know just what kind of effect chemotherapy is going to have on your ongoing career. Okay, because there's a good chance that if you've been diagnosed with early stage cancers, there's a really good chance that the chemo is going to kick it in the ass, and so you're going to be able to move on with your life. But you need to know that once the chemo's done, it's not done. If you understand what I'm saying, there's going to be that ongoing effect, and you need to be able to plan for that. And that's the one thing I think that most medical people don't understand. They deal with the here and the now, and they deal in the context of their specialisation, but they don't have that wider holistic viewpoint that what they're doing to you is going to have some kind of ongoing effect, and you need to be able to plan for that. So really, that's my advice to you. Just be a pain in the ass. Ask a million questions, even if they seem ridiculous. Ask the damn question, okay? Because it's the only way that you're going to know what you might have to go. So that's really it. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope that this has kind of maybe opened your thinking towards chemotherapy, and just remember to make every minute count. Thank you.